If I would have known my rights beforehand, I probably would have never gone to jail. Never. What the cops did to me, looking back now, was illegal. They illegally searched me. They cajoled me into saying things that I didn't want to. After trial, when my attorney abandoned me, those rights, I had a right to a triple RI hearing. I had a right to an evidentiary hearing. All that stuff I didn't know until my last few years of prison. And only because I started studying the law and reading other people's cases, I learned I'm just one in 1,000. It's too prevalent in this country that people are getting taken advantage of and put into prisons. The prison complex and industry has become for profit. Until we eliminate the ability to profit from us, from our lives, from our families, we should take the time to learn our rights, learn how to protect ourselves when a cop approaches us, when a cop pulls us over. Even if you're one of those people who don't do anything wrong, you could get caught up in something that's wrong. There was a lot of people in prison that were there because they were at the wrong place at the wrong time, or because of an accident, because they drove with their cell phone and they were texting and they hit somebody. That's vehicular homicide. They thought they were not criminals, but when you drive and text, you're breaking the law. If you run a stop sign, you're breaking the law. Or run through a red light. They may not seem significant, but if you hit somebody, it can come significant very quickly. I thought about talking to a couple of my friends and recording it over the issues. Steven, he works in the law library at a prison, so he's familiar with a lot of these laws and our rights too. So I thought we would put together a few videos and give examples of what to do, what not to do. And if you have any suggestions, please let me know, or if we say something that's wrong, please let me know. I've done a lot of fact checking in this, but I know the laws are always changing. It's hard to keep on top of that. With that being said, thank you, and have fun with us learning the laws. The last time we talked a lot about your case, and one thing I don't think we talked enough about, though, is how could a person wind up in prison if they really are innocent? And I know, because from reading a lot of comments and reading a lot of stories, people don't understand that. They really believe that if they're in prison, they must be guilty. Our system is correct. Our system is flawless. And I really just want to touch base on that, because I know that our system is not flawless. It may have been when it was created, I'm not sure. Long before our time, I know that. And I can think back to when Thomas Jefferson, I remember reading his quote, I remember reading it several times. He had said, I would rather see 100 guilty people go innocent than one innocent person go to jail. That's how sure I am about these constitutional rights that we've created. You and I know, especially from working in the law library, reading other people's cases, the Constitution is really just a set of guidelines. In Pennsylvania, what really governs people's rights are case law. And the case laws that we have, I think, have become so saturated with, I'm going to say, corruption, because there's a case law that can substantiate any claim you have. I have an illegal sentence. Here's the statute that says this is an unwaivable error. This cannot be waived in the court of law if I raise this claim. And then you have case laws that say, where the federal judge said, even though this is a non-waivable issue, we have to waive this pursuant to the PCRA. There's a case law for and against anything you ever have to bring up.
Right.
Obviously, I'm going to go right into the suggestion for it would be to eradicate all case law and rebuild that entire structure of statutes with an actual standard. If non-waivable issues. These are non-waivable issues. If a person is claiming actual innocence and says they have evidence, that evidence should be reviewed, and then et cetera, et
Correct.
cetera. What do you
Right.
think?
I'm absolutely with you. But a lot of people, a lot of people don't know how they land here. They don't know the whole process. I told you my stepmom was saying, well, she asked me, well, what is the process? And I told her I'll call her back and let her know. But the process is not just see on TV. We see people. You see Christopher Maloney from Law and Order or something. You see him, he shows up to you, but it's the process before he gets to you, which
Right.
I don't know if people know, but there are only two ways you can get arrested. I should say initiate the proceedings. I should say, uh, if somebody says you've done something, they take it to a cop. He fills out a complaint, and then he fills out an affidavit of probable cause and takes that to the judge. And the judge signs off on it, and then the person is a wanted person. The other way to get arrested is if you happen to be committing a crime in the presence of an officer. That gives him probable cause. Both ways you need probable cause. Like he can't just walk up to me. Say if I see you on the street and there's a broken window over there, and he's just walking past. He says, "Hey, you! I think you did this. I'm gonna lock you up." And you don't have. He didn't. He's just drawing this out of his head. He has to have probable cause. So every arrest has to have it. Either way, if it's by criminal complaint or either by him witnessing you do something. Now, once you do get arrested, this process. The next thing is you see a magistrate, and a magistrate is a judge. And now, what the magistrate is supposed to do is see if you were arrested with probable cause. If he can't establish probable cause right then and there, he's supposed to let you go. Keyword supposed. That doesn't always happen. They usually end up bounding you over anyway because a lot of us don't know about the probable cause establishment. And the feds, I think it's called a Gerstein hearing. I don't know what it's called for the state, but you go to your probable, you have this probable cause here, and they're supposed to establish it. And then the next step is preliminary hearing. Now, preliminary hearing, this is where they show their case. They let you know just enough. They don't have to give you all the evidence. They only have to present enough to bound you over for trial, which is called a prima facie case. If they can show a prima facie case, then they bound you over for trial. And what happens after you're bound over for trial? They're supposed to file something called a bill of information, and then that's your charging document, and it lists all your charges, what you're being charged with. After that, you go to your formal arraignment, which you're supposed to be there and enter a plea. And now, if you have a capital case, they give you a second lawyer at this formal arraignment. So you get formally arraigned, then you're just sitting. Now, if you haven't made bail, you're sitting in the county. Hopefully, you're going to the law library, not goofing off and communicating with your attorney. That's what should be being done at in a county. How was it like that for you in county? Did you get into the law library and all that other stuff in the county?
No, I was in the on the Max block when I was in the county, so they didn't allow us access directly to it. I could request a book, and not knowing what
Yeah,
the
that's no
heck to
good.
request, I would just write a request slip, and they would send me some stuff. But I didn't start to learn the law though until 2016. I really relied on that attorney that they assign you when you file
Right.
that packet. And
That that's crazy because let's say you can't afford an attorney, right? And you're left to the wolves, and you got this crappy law library. I don't know what county you were in, but how can you prepare your defense? Usually they appoint your attorney, right, who's underpaid if you can't afford. I mean, so if you can't afford an attorney, they appoint one to you, who's usually overworked and underpaid. So how good of a representation you think you're going to get from this guy?
well, none.
Not
And actually, mine was a paid attorney, but
right,
they still they don't care. It's almost like they have something better to do. That's sort of their attitude that they always have. They have something better to do. That's why you'll always hear somebody saying, "Man, I can't get a hold of my attorney." One of the most prevalent motions that I filed for people in there was motions to compel. I think
right.
I
Force them to
say
do something.
Yeah, a motion to compel, where I would file to the courts and say, hey, my attorney isn't doing this. He's not talking to me. Can you please compel him to get with me?
If a guy's in the county, right? What I can recommend, because if you write to your attorney, he can always say I didn't get it, you didn't tell me that. So what I tell guys here, I say, hey, when you write to your attorney, send a copy to the courthouse. What the courthouse would do is timestamp it and file it, and then send him a copy. So now you have all your issues on record that you want to get across. So he can't come down later and say, hey, you didn't tell me that.
Right.
So that's what I tell dudes all the time. Hey, to safeguard yourself. But realize the attorneys, their obligation is to the court and the public first, and not you. So I forget what that is. It's a maxim called corpus juris secundum, but it says the obligation is to the court and the public first. So they serve like a dual obligation, which is, I don't know how they can do that. How can they satisfy both parties at the same time?
Right.
I want to revisit on something real quick. When I said about that magistrate, you're supposed to get a copy of your criminal complaint with your affidavit of probable cause, letting you know why they're arresting you when you get there. But a lot of people don't get that. Like I was talking today to a guy, he didn't even know what a bill of information was. He wasn't at his formal arraignment. I find a lot of guys from Philly don't know what their bill of information is, and it's real key. It's supposed to be on your docket sheet, but a lot of guys say like, "What the hell is that?" But I believe I was watching some talk show, and I'm saying and she was reading something about the Constitution, but who reads that? Nobody reads that. I think in every high school they should have a civics class. And they should have a basic law class, like just something like Law 101, so they can explain like what I just mentioned here about your whole process. That way they can probably safeguard themselves from winding up in prison, because a lot of guys out here doing what they're doing, running the streets and in the game they call it, but it's really not a game. These guys, if you're in the game, you don't even know the rules. So if you land in jail, you're screwed.
I have some examples I can even give, because let's go back to the preliminary hearing. I think that that's one of the most important parts of a case. Of when you're being charged, you're not convicted. When you're being charged with something, you go to what's called a preliminary hearing. Most people, you'll see, they waive it. Somehow, for some reason, their attorneys convince them into waiving it, and it's usually
never waive nothing.
They may say they're going to drop this negligible charge. We're going to waive it. I'm going to give you an example. Is my one friend's in the county right now, and I told him even before, I said, do not waive that preliminary hearing. Make sure you go over this, and this, because you can beat your entire case right there. And if you feel that because he had a public defender, if you feel that your public defender is not for that, then just stand up in the court and say, I ask for a continuance. This attorney is not going to represent my best interest. And then we'll start over. When you're in a preliminary hearing, the goal of that, the whole reason for a preliminary hearing is for the Commonwealth, the state, to show that there is enough evidence to hold you over to a trial. And in a lot of cases, there's not enough evidence. In his case, there wasn't enough evidence. The evidence that they were using against him was evidence they found in his pocket after he had an overdose. And there's that law, I forgot, it's something like a Samaritan law, or something to do with addiction, where if they administer Narcan to you and you tell them something, and they even said it to him, hey, you can talk to us, nothing you say will be used against you. This is a part of this, whatever it was. But we need to know what drugs you took so we can help you. Do you have anything on you? And he's like, yeah, here, this is what I took. And then the cop took that and put that into evidence. Now, at a preliminary hearing, that's it. That's where you say, can you put the officer on stand, please? And then I'm going to question him. Do you remember saying this to me? Do you remember finding this evidence after you had administered Narcan? All right, then that evidence is inadmissible. And that's the only evidence you have against me. Therefore, there's not enough evidence for me to go to trial. That's an example. And then you remember my one cellie during COVID, I did his appeal. And the evidence they used against him was a cop during the preliminary hearing who testified on behalf of a person who he beat up. And then a new case law, McClellan, came out saying a cop can't testify at a preliminary hearing to substantiate the prima facie because that should be considered hearsay at that level. At trial, if there's enough evidence to hold you over to a trial, a cop then could potentially testify on behalf of somebody, but not at a preliminary hearing. They ended up vacating that sentence because his preliminary hearing was flawed.
You say he can testify at the trial. Like, I would still argue, like, hey, I got a right to face my accuser. You're not the one that was the victim, so how can that fly? Like, I don't understand. You have a right to face your accuser.
I agree, but they can do that at a trial. A police officer can. I mean, as of right now, they can.
Yes, that's not cool.
But not at a preliminary hearing.
That's not cool. Well, yeah, like you said, we just don't know. We find ourselves in a certain situation. Like a lot of people think that if a cop approaches you, you have to talk to him. No, you have the absolute right to say, I don't want to talk to you. All that stuff about, yeah, we'll lock you up for obstruction if you don't talk to us. You're wanted for questioning. Come on down to the station with us. There's no such thing as wanted for questioning. They either want to question you or you're wanted, meaning they have a warrant for you. But you don't have to talk to the police if they come up to you and ask you some questions like, hey, listen, I don't have nothing to say. You can just walk away. And if they try to hold you there, that's like I forget what case was, but that's like saying that constitutes as an arrest. Like, I'm not free to leave. Right. So you always want to ask him, hey, am I under arrest? And he says no. Who then say, have a nice day, officer. I'll talk to you later. Or hold on, let me call my attorney. See if you want to talk to him. Then he'll probably say, okay, no, we don't want to talk to you. But you don't have to talk to the police.
There's these groups right now, and it seems like they're deliberately going out and inciting or eliciting some sort of activity where police are getting called to them, and then they do that and they record it. I wouldn't recommend that. I wouldn't suggest that, and I'm not gonna say all cops are bad, but also I wouldn't even, don't push your luck unless you're recording it, because if you don't have a recording, it's your word against theirs, and your word is not gonna fly in the court of law. That's just the way it is.
They're always right.
Yeah, and then somebody incarcerated has de minimis of reputation or merit in their words. So don't ever think that, I know what I'm doing is right, because if you can't prove it, you're not doing what's right.
I've recommended whoever's out there, everybody should at least read the Constitution. Now, the book remember that little book that I pointed out to you, the United States Constitution, a graphic adaptation? That's perfect for somebody who knows nothing, because it lays it out in the simplest terms. It's called the United States Constitution, a graphic adaptation, and it's by John Hennessy.
You talking about the one you gave me while I was in there to read?
Yes, it's so simple. Like, it breaks it down so simple.
That was a lot. That was a big book.
Well, it was a little comic book. Everybody laughs when they see me reading it, but I'm saying, listen, this little comic book has so much information. It lays it out it's not a comic book, but it's a graphic version of it. But you liked it, right?
I did, but I was in prison. I had the time. People out here don't have the time to read something like that. But there are definitely.
It can save your life.
I understand, but there are shorts you can look up, or you can Google what are my constitutional rights, and they'll give you at least a breakdown. And the ones to know really are 1 through 14. And every state has some sort of adaptation of each of them.
You said people are not going to read books. The NOLO books are real good. It's the one book I had, the Criminal Law Handbook. It was a NOLO book. They had a whole section on dealing with the police if you encountered them, what to say, what not to say. And remember, they tell you when they Mirandize you, what you say can and will be used against you. So why would you say anything? The moment you initiate, your Miranda goes out the window.
We still got a lot more to talk about on this. Well,
as far as
40 minutes ain't cover it.
Pre-trial stuff, because pre-trial, like, a lawyer could put in motions and they get answered, denied, or
motions to suppress. If you do get past that prelim, there's things you need to know. Those motions to suppress. There should never be a case where you're found guilty and you look back and there's no pre-trial motions filed.
I'm one to suppress. Yeah, he didn't file nothing to suppress nothing.
All
He
right.
didn't file nothing.
All right.